Thank you all for joining me on this important day. I first want to say thank you to Senator Cardin for his leadership on this issue and for my fellow co-leads in the House, Ranking Member Raskin, Congresswoman Fushi, as well as Congressman Carter. I'd also like to thank the Voting Rights Restoration Working Group, the Reentry Working Group, and Daniel's Initiative for their work to change the hearts and minds on this issue. I'm also so grateful to have Brittany Lovely here today to tell her story, her very real story, of the difficulties of navigating patchwork legislation. As a Texan, I've seen how our great governor, and please understand that there is shade in that statement, how our great governor, Greg Abbott, has criminalized voting. On June 30th, my governor signed House Bill 1243, which would increase criminal penalties for the offense of illegal voting from a misdemeanor to a felony. Now, to give a little bit of a background on this is an issue that we actually reduced last session when I was serving in the Texas House. And that was because of a woman by the name of Crystal Mason, which some of you may know. In 2016, Crystal Mason cast a provisional ballot in the state of Texas. And for those of you that don't know how a provisional ballot works in our state, basically her ballot was never counted. It was officially never really even cast. But Crystal didn't know that as a returning citizen on parole-ish, and I say it that way because she wasn't really on parole, Crystal Mason had been convicted in the federal system and she was released. And so that release was not considered parole because we don't really do federal parole. She was just on federal release. Well, the Texas law says if you are on parole or probation, then you can't cast a ballot. Well, she technically wasn't on either one of them, and that's why this bill matters so much. But this was someone who felt like she should participate in the process and thought that she had every right to participate in the process. She made a mistake that unfortunately we're going to see other people make because the laws are all over the place. And that's why we want one standard that we are offering in the DRA. Unfortunately, this mistake is supposed to cost her 5 years in prison. That's what she was sentenced to. Now, this has been up on appeal, it's been debated, and one of the reasons that we bettered this law last session was specifically because of Crystal Mason, because she did not know and she was not intending to break the law, and it was confusing. Now, I'll say now what I said as a private citizen testifying back in 2019 on this issue. When state governments create confusion about the voting laws and prosecute innocent mistakes to the fullest extent possible, people just don't risk it. It's yet another way to make sure that voter suppression is real in this country. These policies are disenfranchising voters, both in law and in practice. Republicans in Texas want to reinstate these penalties next year, criminalizing voters who cast their vote without knowing that they're ineligible. We've already seen this in Florida, where dozens of returning citizens believing their rights have been restored and after being able to register to vote by Florida government officials were arrested by Governor DeSantis for the crime of illegal voting. The majority of these cases have been thrown out and others are unlikely to stand up in court, but the damage has already been done. American voters, especially black and brown voters, are getting the message that just casting a vote could land them in jail. Voting restrictions impact everyone. In 2022, over 4.5 million U.S. citizens, or about 1 in 50 adults, could not vote as a result of a felony conviction. However, we know the criminal justice system has a disproportionate impact on minorities in our society. More than 6% of voting-age black Americans are disenfranchised due to felony convictions. Latinos have been in prison at 2 times the rate of white citizens. Given the actions of the state legislatures in states such as Texas and Florida, our federal government must make this message clear. People who have served their time deserve to have their right to vote restored. Requiring returning citizens to pay fines and fees related to their incarceration sounds a little too familiar to me. It sounds like something like a modern day poll tax, something that allegedly was only alive and well during Jim Crow. How are formerly incarcerated persons functioning and productive members of our society if they cannot participate in the most fundamental feature of a true democracy? The answer is they can't. Senator Cardin and I have introduced the Democracy Restoration Act to draw a line in the sand and end the permanent denial of federal voting rights for individuals with criminal convictions who have been released from incarceration regardless of fines, fees, parole, or probation. This bill would be a positive step towards nationwide rights restoration for returning citizens and would galvanize the fight against state voter suppression in states like mine. I want to now bring the great senator up to deliver remarks.
Representative Crockett, first of all, thank you very much for your extraordinary leadership on this critically important issue. The Democracy Restoration Act is all about civil rights and voter integrity and making sure that our system is fair and equitable. Representative Crockett mentioned that 2% of Americans are disqualified from voting today because of the laws of states. But you may have passed over, she said, in certain minority communities, that's 6%. And then if you look at which states have it, it's even a higher percentage in many states of minority populations that have been disqualified from voting because of these laws that literally were passed during the Jim Crow era. They're still in the books. 12 states have a permanent lifetime disqualification because of a conviction. And let me tell you something, the classification of these convictions and the ways that they were applied was clearly discriminatory. Yeah. It was an effort to minimize the votes of minority communities. It's way past time that we end this practice. And that's exactly what Representative Crockett's bill will do, is establish a federal standard for federal elections. That's our responsibility. And it's totally within our jurisdiction to do this. I'll just make one other point, and I'm proud to be the sponsor in the Senate. We have a House-Senate bill to do this. I have many of my colleagues that have co-sponsored this. I know you have colleagues in the House that have done this. I want to make one last point. It's in our values to recognize that second chance is part of America. When someone has made a mistake, they paid their price for that mistake, they should be welcomed back into our community because it's the right thing to do from the values of America. But it's also the smart thing to do for our economy and our community. And when you say to returning citizens, we want you back, but you can't participate in the political system, that's a clear message. So this is an important bill that we've got to get done. It is a civil rights struggle of our time, and I'm proud to be on this team, and we're going to do everything we can to make this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Troy Carter, representing Louisiana's 2nd Congressional District, and I am honored to stand with Senator Cardin and Representative Crockett. Two outstanding leaders, two leaders that have come up with a great piece of legislation that I am honored to co-sponsor. Proudly honored to co-sponsor the Democracy Restoration Act to restore voting rights to formerly incarcerated citizens, because there's no justification for denying people who have paid their debt to society an opportunity to have a voice in our democracy. I firmly believe in the principles of justice, equality, and second chances. It is crucial that we uphold the fundamental rights to vote for all citizens, including formerly incarcerated individuals who have served their time and seek reinstatement to reintegrate into society as a productive and responsible citizen. By granting them ability to cast their ballots, we recognize their inherent dignity and knowledge that their voices matter in shaping the future of our great nation. This legislation is not about expanding just voter access. It's about doing the right thing. It's about fostering inclusivity, empathy, and reconciliation. It's about ensuring that our democracy truly represents all of its people, all with an underscore, italics, and bolding. All. Let's embrace the values of fairness and compassion as we take this significant step toward a more just and inclusive society. Today, we reaffirm our commitment to a democracy that leaves no one behind. Let me say that again. A democracy that leaves no one behind. That's what our democracy is about. That's the principles of this country that make us so strong, so special, so unique. That's what makes us Americans. That we recognize that there are erasers on pencils for a reason. Yeah. We sometimes make mistakes. Right. But when you've paid your debt to society and you're ready to come back new and improved, better and stronger, more determined and committed to be a part of this great country and to provide solutions and to speak to the young people about the mistakes that you've made that makes you a better citizen. And we're here today to stand with you. God bless you.
Good afternoon. My name is Breon Wells, and I'm the president and founder of the Daniel Initiative and also the co-chair of the Reentry Working Group. The Reentry Working Group is a collaboration of organizations, activists, and advocates across the country who are committed to dismantling the myriad collateral consequences that formerly incarcerated and justice impacted individuals face. The Democracy Restoration Act, we are excited that it is being reintroduced in this Congress. It is critical, it is necessary. And it is necessary for us to understand that when we're talking about the Democracy Restoration Act, we are not just talking about access to the ballot box, but we're actually talking about restoring our community. We're talking about restoring the economy. I have with me and I bring with me here a support letter from the Reentry Working Group, the Voting Rights Restoration Working Group, and over 200 organizations and individuals from across the country who have supported the leadership of both Representative Crockett and of Senator Cardin and the numerous senators and congressmen that have joined them in this effort. For us, this is imperative and critical because when we look at it, felony disenfranchisement is one of the most pernicious of collateral consequences. It's connected to one's ability even to be able to gain housing, to gain employment. If you're an entrepreneur, a formerly incarcerated entrepreneur, there are some setbacks that one incurs. But the reason felony disenfranchisement is so pernicious is because it's dehumanizing. Not only is it dehumanizing, it strips you of your citizenship. We strive at the Reentry Working Group to move towards a space where no one's right to vote is ever revoked for any reason. And we believe that the Democracy Restoration Act is one strong step in that direction. I want to say that we are pleased that this Congress, we had more than 60 House members that joined along with the leadership of Representative Crockett. We had more than 25 U.S. senators that joined in with Senator Cardin. And so I want to take this moment actually to thank you, Representative Crockett, for your leadership on this. When we approached her and her team took the ball running. These 60 House members is because of the efforts that she has done. She showed it. We want to thank you, Congressman Carter, for your leadership in this issue. We want to thank Congresswoman Foushee. We want to thank Congressman Raskin. We want to thank Congressman Frost for their leadership on this issue. And then I also do want to thank Senator Cardin. I would be remiss as he has announced that he is, this would be his last term. Since 2008, he has been a steadfast partner on this issue. He has often been the one leading in the tough conversations, both behind the scenes and publicly. And so this Democracy Restoration Act would not even have its vigor had it not been for his leadership. But I also want to give note to how little people may know that this is not the only issue with criminal justice that he has focused on. He has utilized his podium as the chair of the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee to fight for the rights of formerly incarcerated and justice-impacted entrepreneurs. And so we are excited about this opportunity that we have to engage the rest of Congress and this administration on this issue to see it become law. I will finally say that as we restore the vote, it is important for us to understand that voting rights restoration work is voting rights work. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Crockett. Thank you, Breon, for all the work you've done, Senator Cardin, and the many champions of justice that are supporting this essential piece of legislation. I'm honored to be up here with you all today, working on this amazing piece of legislation and just you all taking an active role in this. So my name is Brittany Lovely, and I have had the privilege of co-chairing the Voting Rights Restoration Working Group, who have been working on the Democracy Restoration Act. As Breon said, voting rights restoration is voting rights work. And the DRA is the embodiment of our commitment to civil rights, racial justice, and the principles that we are promised by our democracy. This act holds the power of so much transformation for our society. It's not just a political document, but a testament to our belief in building a nation that truly reflects each and every voice of our communities. For me, this is personal. 8 years ago, I released from prison with $40 and a bus pass. I returned to my community, went back to school to pursue my college education. This was the middle of the 2016 election cycle, and there were so many passionate conversations around me about the future of our country. But I felt like an outsider. I felt like I had no voice. I wasn't a full citizen. So having this deep desire to get involved in my community, I started looking around and researching about my restoration process. See, I had been told that my rights would be taken away, but there was no clarity about if, when, or how I might get them back. So I talked to everyone I could think of. I talked to my corrections officer, I talked to election staff, I talked to the county clerk, I talked to the people on my college campus who were registering people to vote. I got multiple different answers, I got pointed in different directions, and nobody knew, right? There was no clarity. So I thought it would be best to leave it in the hands of the professionals, right? Trust my government, trust the process. So I registered to vote. I figured if I was eligible, I would receive my voter registration card. If I was ineligible, I would be denied. Well, I received my voter registration card and I cast my ballot. Now we're on the edge of our seats because we were talking about earlier, a lot of people have gone through this process with no clarity. I, luckily, was in a state that had already been doing some work on rights restoration. So I cast my ballot and I received no negative consequences. But that is not the story for everyone across the country. Going through the exact same thing as me, asking everyone, trying to get involved, wanting to cast their ballot, be citizens. So I had an inroad. But herein lies the problem. This patchwork of laws across our country is confusing, and it creates this standard that comes up with two different problems, right? One, people are disenfranchised who would otherwise be eligible because they don't want to break the law. The other is people are told they're eligible and they're prosecuted for casting their ballot. So the DRA provides a clear solution to both of these problems. And it promotes civic engagement and trust in elections. So despite 56% of American voters believing that voting should be a guaranteed right for citizens 18 and older, regardless of incarceration status, regardless of conviction history, 4.6 of our neighbors who are living in communities, working in community, paying taxes, raising families, they are barred from the ballot. So voting is not just about picking a person to represent you. It's about fully engaging in building the kind of community you want to live in. It's about shaping the world around you. It's about believing in something better. My journey taught me that democracy is not merely an abstract concept. It is a tangible force that has the power to heal. When we are denied the right to vote, we are denied the opportunity to participate in our communities. We are denied the opportunity to participate in the decisions that shape our lives, our communities, and our nation. We are denied the chance to truly belong. We understand that true justice lies not in the perpetual isolation of individuals, but in the ability to claim their rightful place as active, engaged citizens. Passing the Democracy Restoration Act sends a resounding message that we refuse to accept a democracy that silences, marginalizes, or excludes any of its people. I stand before you today not just as an activist, but as a living testament to the transformative power of democracy. 8 years ago, I released with $40 and a bus pass. Since then, I've graduated with multiple degrees. I've served in different capacities in state government. I've led on policy issues such as this, and I've shared my story for the betterment of our society. This fall, I will begin my next journey, attending Georgetown Law in pursuit of my JD.
That's awesome.
Our communities are better when everyone has a voice, when everyone has a vote. So I urge you all to raise your voices, share your stories, and advocate for the passage of the Democracy Restoration Act. Share your voting rights story using the hashtag #RestoreOurVote. Together, we can and we will create a powerfully inclusive democracy that we were promised.
Very good.
Good afternoon. I am Congresswoman Valerie Foushee, the representative for North Carolina's 4th Congressional District. And today I am excited to join Senator Ben Cardin, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, and my colleagues in introducing the Democracy Restoration Act, a monumental step in protecting the right to vote and ensuring that all Americans can have their voices heard in our federal elections. Our right to vote is the cornerstone of our democracy, yet 3 million Americans previously convicted of felonies are unable to participate in the election process due to Jim Crow era voting bans. And these voting bans deny individuals the right to vote even after they have served their time and paid their dues, disenfranchising millions of tax-paying citizens who are living in and contributing to their communities. In fact, a majority of states in our country currently have remnants of these Jim Crow era voting restrictions that are still being used today. Our country has a long history of weaponizing incarceration status, and often that inequitable burden disproportionately impacts Black Americans and communities of color. And it is our duty to help right this wrong. The Democracy Restoration Act will help break this systemic cycle and will end the permanent denial of voting rights for citizens with criminal convictions nationwide. This critical bill will also set federal standards, alleviating confusion on voter eligibility status that many individuals face due to varying state laws, and will ensure equitable access to the ballot no matter where you live. Reforming voter disenfranchisement in the United States is long overdue, and I am immensely proud to co-lead this effort with my colleagues. In the weeks and months ahead, we will continue to fight for a country where democracy can flourish and where the fundamental right to vote is protected for all Americans. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Congressman Jamie Raskin from Maryland's 8th District. Thank you, Congresswoman Foushee. Thank you, Jasmine Crockett and Senator Cardin, for your leadership. I'm delighted to work with you on this really important legislation, the Democracy Restoration Act. You might ask yourself, well, why do we need a Democracy Restoration Act when we have a constitutional right to vote, don't we? Well, that's a complicated question because the Supreme Court in 1974, in a case called Richardson versus Ramirez, said that people who have gone to prison and done good time do not have a constitutional right to vote. And we don't have anywhere in the Constitution that grants a universal affirmative right to vote to everybody. What we have is just a series of anti-discrimination amendments. So the 15th Amendment says you can't discriminate based on race. The 19th Amendment says you can't discriminate based on sex. The 24th Amendment says you can't discriminate based on failure to pay a poll tax. But we don't have what most modern democratic constitutions have around the world. And check out the new South African Constitution. The very first article says that everybody's got a right to vote at every level of government over them, and we don't have that. So now we got millions of people who've gone to prison, who've done good time. They get out, they have every other right restored to them except their right to vote, which we consider historically so central to the meaning of American citizenship. So how is that possible? The vast majority of states have restored people's voting rights. And yet we still have 7 or 8 states which are not doing it, which continue to play games. The strategy of denying people their right to vote after they've served a prison sentence has nothing to do with rehabilitation. It has nothing to do with deterrence. It is all a strategy of mass electoral voter suppression. That's what it's about. It's not about allowing people to complete their sentence or completing their reassimilation to society. On the contrary, it's something that keeps people from reassimilating to society and successfully engaging in their rehabilitation as a citizen. So I was proud that I helped to lead the fight for this in Maryland in 2016. We had the same law as the most backward states in the country today have, which basically said if you get out of prison, you have every other right restored to you, but not your right to vote. And when I got elected to the Senate, I went to see State Senator Gwendolyn Britt from Prince George's County, who had been introducing this for many years. And I said I had campaigned on this, I ran on it, and I really wanted to work with her on restoring voting rights. And she said, great. And she came back to me maybe like 3 or 4 weeks later, and she said, Jamie, we got the former felon Voter Restoration Act out of committee, and we'd love you to be the floor leader on it. And I said, oh my God, I've never even spoken on the Senate floor before. I've only been here for 3 or 4 weeks. I said, I'm really honored and gratified. She said, well, you don't have to be that honored. You're the only white senator willing to do it. And I said, all right, well, I'll take it however I can get it. And so I got up, and then the Republican minority leader got up and said, the Democrats want to give the right to vote back to assailants and felons and bank robbers and murderers and all of these things. And so Gwen, who sat in front of me, turned around and she said, okay, it's your turn. You can get up now. And I said, well, I had an argument for them. I said, the vast majority of people who are going to be reenfranchised under our legislation, unlike the people you're talking about who are never going to get out of prison, are in for nonviolent offenses. And I said, let's take one of my constituents, for example, Jack Abramoff, who lives in Silver Spring, Maryland. I said, now he's gone off to federal prison for 6 years for offenses against the character of our democracy and for distorting democracy. If anybody should be disenfranchised for life, it's him. But on our side of the aisle, we do believe in rehabilitation, and we believe that even a hardened ex-felon like Jack Abramoff should get his right to vote back when he gets out of prison. And so we passed what I was calling the Jack Abramoff Voting Rights Act at that point, and it passed in the Senate, and we reenfranchised 86,000 people, the vast majority of them people in for nonviolent offenses, and we've restored them to that level of citizenship. In our history, the critical hallmarks of citizenship are the right to vote and the right to earn a livelihood. And those are two things that we've got to vindicate for people coming out of prison. We incarcerate more people disproportionately than any other country on earth, and we've got to make sure there's a real pathway to rejoining society on an equal basis. I'm thrilled that we're pushing real hard on the Democracy Restoration Act, and I hope we'll be able to get all of our colleagues behind it. It's a really important statement for moving democracy forward in the new century. So thank you, Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much. And I'm about to close so that you can ask questions. But one of the things that I want you to understand is that this is really a full circle moment. I know a lot of times people see freshmen come in and they see a bill that's been introduced before and they say, okay, they found one who would grab it. But let me tell you, like you just heard from my esteemed ranking member who will soon become the chairman of oversight, soon, not soon enough, but soon. This is a fight that he started before he got here. You also heard conversations around what Senator Cardin has been doing for years. Let me tell you, over 20 years ago, when I was looking to get out of law school, I had to write a paper. And I actually was taking election law as my class to get out of law school. Did not know I would be standing before you today, for sure. But when it came down to the paper, I was like, what am I going to write about? And the specific thing that I wrote about over 20 years ago was just this thing. I actually did the research and I looked at all the different states and I looked at how it was this patchwork that was going on. And I wanted to better understand how it was that this Jim Crow law came about. And one of the most interesting things that I'll never forget when I was studying is that back when this was initially introduced and it was a matter of disenfranchise those that were convicted of felonies, back then they decided that adultery should be a felony, but murder wasn't. And so as we had people that were, say, lynching black folk, that wasn't considered a felony back then. But they said that black men were consistently cheating on their wives and they decided that adultery was. And so they decided that what would be a felony would be those crimes that they felt as if minorities were committing. And then they decided to take the right to vote away. This is a fight that so many of us have put our heart into for decades. And it's a matter of us truly believing that in this country, democracy deserves to be fought for in every single generation. And regardless of those that want to tear us apart, I can tell you that Democrats will continue to fight for democracy, not just for my constituents, not just for Democrats, but for everyone, because that's what real democracy looks like. It looks like giving access to the ballot box to all, not just a select few. It doesn't look like we're constantly saying, you know what, it's too many of them voting. It's a matter of making sure that we all are guaranteed what we thought we were getting in this country, especially in our Constitution. So thank you, and with that, we will answer questions. Yes, ma'am.
How are you planning to get this effort across the finish line? Do you have any interest from Republicans? What have your conversations been like with leadership? I know Senator Cardin introduced a companion version in the Senate as well, but you can speak to the House.
Well, I don't know if you saw our latest news that we won't quite be working tomorrow. Listen, it is hard to conceptualize how much of real consequence we can get done in this chaotic session. When I swore in, I never thought that it would take 15 votes just to get a speaker chosen. And so what we've come to recognize is that even the Republicans are having a hard time getting their agenda across. I think that it's important that regardless as to whether or not we actually get it across the line, that we have the real conversations about why it matters, so that hopefully we can continue to build. Unfortunately, as it was already stated by Congressman Raskin, he talked about the fact that this is something that they had been working on. And then he showed up, and 3 weeks in, it gets done. So hopefully he has that kind of magic this time. But I will say that no matter if we can get it done this session, I'm not giving up, because it requires us to be in this fight, not just for a day, but for the long haul. So we will continue to have the conversations. I think that it's important as we go on this August recess to try to make sure that we build a consensus and make sure that we get people in rural America that can tell the stories of their family members that are being disenfranchised. I think if we can get the right coalition of people to start talking about the fact that it doesn't just affect urban, black and brown America, but it's actually affecting all of America, urban, rural, black, brown, and white. I think that we can get enough. We only need a few. Thank you.
Can I say something about that too?
Yeah.
I mean, as more and more Republicans go to jail, there's going to be more interest in the Republican Party in re-enfranchising former prisoners. And you know, if you look at what happened on January 6th, there are hundreds and hundreds of people who've been convicted or pleaded guilty, and if they've done their good time and they've come back, they should have their voting rights restored to them. Right. And a lot of them, by the way, have been changing their minds about what they did. A lot of them have said that they fell under the spell of Donald Trump and his propaganda and disinformation, and they don't buy it, and it's not going to happen to them again. And that's a great example of the kind of rethinking and rehabilitation people can go through. But in any event, the Supreme Court has repeatedly said, there's a great case from Texas where there was an attempt to disenfranchise military voters on the grounds that they wouldn't think like the people of Texas. And the Supreme Court said, we don't disenfranchise people based on predictions on how they're going to vote. Right. That's up to them. Right. And everybody has the right to vote regardless of what their political party designation or political philosophy is.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.